Naglabas po tayo today ng Executive Order number 3. Allowing voluntary wearing of face masks in outdoor settings and reiterating the continued implementation of minimum public health standards during the state of public health emergency relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to that, we're happy to announce that we are 6% away from the wall of immunity. That's why we're malakas na ang loob natin for face masks. Now, congruent to that as well, the state of calamity is extended for possibly 3 months, but only for the purpose of preserving the benefits under it. We will transition out of the state of calamity after further review. So, good news all around.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, ako po si Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Riza Diaz. The big story tonight.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has signed an executive order making face masks voluntary in outdoor areas.
Now here's what we know about Executive Order number 3. Malacanang now allows the voluntary wearing of face masks in open spaces and non-crowded outdoor areas with good ventilation. However, the government still highly encourages those that are not fully vaccinated, senior citizens, and immunocompromised individuals to wear their face masks outdoors. Now, in his executive order, President Marcos also directed Filipinos to still wear face masks in indoor establishments or rather any mode of public transportation and outdoor areas where physical distancing cannot be maintained.
Well, the palace has greenlit the voluntary use of face masks outdoors. Health experts still recommend keeping the public masked at all times. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazar tells us why in this report.
Executive Order number 3 immediately took effect after it was signed by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. on Monday. But while the new policy recommends that seniors, immunocompromised individuals, and those who have yet to be fully vaccinated still wear face masks outdoors, the policy is not clear when it comes to children. The press secretary explained Marcos Jr. approved the Interagency Task Force's recommendation based on evidence.
He had imposed a condition, and one of that is the establishment of the wall of immunity. Since we are 6% away from that, then it's time.
While EO number 3 stated that the government has already vaccinated up to 93% of the target population, DOH OIC Maria Rosario Vergere maintains it's still better to wear face masks outdoors.
The position of the department is for us to continue the wearing of the face mask still outdoors. But during the interagency task force meeting, several evidences were presented by the other sectors.
The Private Hospital Association of the Philippines shared the same sentiment. The group said that our vaccine immunity is still not enough, since only 23% of the target population has received their booster shots.
The more na dapat tayong mag-mask, no? Kasi yung mga nakadalawang doses lang, halimbawa first and second dose, ay most probably nag-wane ng immunity nun.
For its part, Malacanang says they are open for feedback and may adjust the health guidelines depending on the impact of the policy in the next few months. But the government remains hopeful that the mask mandate could completely be lifted by the end of the year. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Ahead of Executive Order number 3, the Iloilo provincial government has already lifted last week the mandatory wearing of face masks in outdoor settings. To tell us more about their implementation of their relaxed mask rules, we have with us Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor. He's joining us over the phone. Gov, good evening.
Good evening, Robbie and Risa.
Good evening, sir.
Magandang gabi sa mga nakikinig at nanonood.
Gov, magandang gabi po and thank you for joining us. We'd like to ask, kamusta po itong naging implementation ninyo ng bagong order po na ito so far? Yung pagsusuot po ba ng masks indoors, let's just clarify, that still is mandatory, na still is required, correct?
Yes, tama yan. As in ating EO, that is also based on the IATF guidelines on the COVID-19 alert level system. At kung outdoors, ay optional na lang, except na lang kung kumakain at outdoor exercises at sports. No? At kung indoor, mandatory pa rin yan.
Gov, maybe you could give us, you've had some days ahead of this national order. What lessons can we take from Iloilo, whether in terms of how hard it is or maybe some things to watch out for?
No, sa ilang araw na nag-implement tayo kasi we issued the Executive Order 260G, September 7, it was effective immediately. We go around at ang observation natin na kahit optional ang face mask outdoors, marami pa rin ang gumagamit ng face mask. Kagagaling ko lang sa isang inauguration at doon nagsa-face mask pa rin ang mga tao. Tinanong ko sila kung optional na ngayon kung outdoor, sabi nila, mas mabuti pa rin kung may protection tayo.
But Gov, meron pa bang pagkakaiba sa pagtrato natin sa mga vaccinated at saka hindi vaccinated?
Tama, kasi alam mo yung basihan nito ng natin, halimbawa nitong optional natin na paggamit ng face mask outdoors. Yung basihan sa COVID-19 alert level system natin. Anong sinasabi? Dalawang bagay kasi yung sinasabi ng COVID-19 alert level system. Na number 1, papayagan natin kayo na magbukas at magtipon-tipon kung bakunado kayo. Mas mabuti kung may booster. At ilalagay natin ang isang lugar sa COVID-19 alert level system 1 kung at least 70% na ang vaccination nyo. So the COVID-19 alert level system is really about the vaccine. At ang level of confidence natin sa pag-i-issue ng mga ganong protocols na optional na ang paggamit ng face mask outdoors ay galing dyan na we reap the benefits of the vaccination kasi yan ang frontline strategy ng at this point yan ang frontline strategy natin laban sa COVID-19. We spend a lot of resources and time on vaccination para makapagbukas na ang ato ng ekonomiya, matagdagan na natin ang people circulation. So yan ang nangyayari ngayon sa atin, the steps that we are taking and the protocols that we are implementing are step towards yung new normal natin.
Gov, as per a week of implementing this na non-mandatory na po ang pagsusuot ng face masks, we'd like to know if you have checked, let's say, the numbers of infections. Is there an increase? May pagbabago po ba? Or does it remain the same?
Ay, hindi pa natin mararamdaman. Pero even before we issue this, ang mga gatekeeping indicators natin dito sa probinsya, Risa and Robbie, mababa na. Ang average daily attack rate, the week growth rate. Pero ang importante sa lahat yung level of vaccination nasa probinsya ng Iloilo, we are at least 87%. It can be more dahil may mga reports pa na pumapasok. Pero ang gatekeeping indicators natin ng COVID-19 ay mababa. We will observe kung may maging epekto ba ang pagluwang natin ng konti. We will see, but again, we are confident that saan nanggagaling yung level of confidence natin. Nasa din naman kasi sa COVID-19 alert level system na ang frontline strategy natin ay ang vaccination at malayo nang narating natin sa vaccination natin.
Gov, isa na lang po, doon po sa order na pwede na sa outdoors. From your experience, is there any room for confusion on outdoors? I ask also because sa order kanina, kinlarify din ng Press Secretary na non-crowded outdoor areas. How simple or how complicated is the term you're finding? Or is that self-explanatory for both the people as well as the implementers?
Yes, tama, may mga gray areas, no? Halimbawa, public market. Ang public market ay may mga lugar din na parang indoor yan. Meron ding bukas, no? Pero ang sinasabi ko dito sa mga kababayan natin, after 2.5 years of COVID-19, no? Malinaw na sa atin kung ano ang mga conditions, ano ang mga lugar at yung mga circumstances na dagdagan natin ang ating protection. Pwede na natin itiwala yan sa mga kababayan natin. Kasi yung after 2.5 years, yung mga protocols natin hindi na dahil obligado sila. Kundi alam na natin, no? Alam na natin kung ano ang gagawin natin para mas maproteksyon na natin ating sarili. And I think ang collective wisdom ng ating mamayan ay nandyan na.
Alright, maraming salamat po. That was Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor Jr. Now join us in the conversation. Our big question tonight. Will you still wear face masks even though it is now optional outdoors? Now share with us your thoughts on our Facebook and YouTube live stream or post a tweet with the hashtag #TheBigStory. We'll show some of your comments later on in the program. Now, right after the break, we'll be discussing some of the relaxed mask mandates all over the world. That and more when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News.
This is AP News Minute. Widespread power outages are reported in Ukraine after Russia attacked power stations and other infrastructure. This came after Ukrainian forces pushed Russian troops out of large areas that the Russians had occupied in northeast Ukraine. Huge crowds of mourners packed streets and roads in Scotland as a procession brought Queen Elizabeth II's flag-draped coffin to Edinburgh. The White House has confirmed that President Biden will attend the Queen's funeral on September 19th. There are concerns that rising river levels could cause more flooding in Pakistan. Floods from massive monsoon rains are blamed for killing around 1,400 people and leaving millions homeless. The mosquito fire east of Sacramento, California spread to nearly 65 square miles and was just 10% contained on Sunday. About 11,000 residents were under evacuation orders. Lisa Dwyer, The Associated Press, with AP News Minute.
The baby boomers of the world are hitting retirement age, but many of them continue to work. The generation famous for rewriting the rules is now reshaping the twilight of their lives. Here's the situation. For older Americans, there are practical reasons to keep working. Many retirement-age homeowners have yet to pay off their mortgages or student loans, and rising medical costs are a big factor. Some simply can't afford a 30-year vacation, while others aren't willing to give up enriching careers for golf courses and bingo matches. And compounding the issue has been the gradual privatization of retirement programs. In the 1970s, employers began to offer 401ks in place of pensions with guaranteed benefits. But 401ks that were invested heavily in the stock market lost much of their value during economic downturns. Here's the argument. Americans are starting retirement with little savings, and that means Americans work more than most other wealthy nations. 18% of Americans over the age of 65 are still working. That's in contrast to 6% in Germany, 10% in the UK, and 22% in Japan. But affording retirement is not just an American problem. The world's birth rate is declining. That means fewer workers and fewer people contributing to pension programs. With aging population worldwide, governments fear that pension programs could become insolvent without a robust workforce, so many seniors are being encouraged to stay on the job. In 2011, the UK abolished its default retirement age of 65. Most people now work as long as they want.
You're watching The Big Story here on One News. Before the Philippines, several countries had already started to ease their mask mandates on the back of around 70% of the world population having already received their COVID-19 vaccines. In Europe, many nations had already fully lifted their face mask requirements. These include Britain, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. Mask-wearing policies have also eased in the United States, where many citizens used to oppose mandatory masking. wearing a face mask is no longer required in their airports and trains. In France, the mask mandate has already been lifted in public spaces since March, and in the Netherlands, masks are only required in airports. In Spain and Portugal and Belgium, mask wearing is only mandatory in hospitals as well as in public transportation like trains, buses, and boats. Meanwhile, in Canada is still recommending the wearing of face masks, but it is no longer a requirement for citizens even in indoor settings. For incoming visitors, however, they are still required to wear their masks for 2 weeks after arrival to avoid potential virus transmissions. In China, where the COVID-19 virus was first discovered, an aggressive zero-COVID policy is still in place. Masks are still required in public spaces, especially in areas that have reported COVID-19 infections. Masking is meanwhile strongly recommended by the Japanese government, but it is not mandated. Still, many businesses require the wearing of face masks before allowing customers to enter the establishments. And in South Korea, rules on social distancing have been lifted since April, and masking rules have also been relaxed. Even our neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia, have eased their own mask policies. Since May, mask wearing is only required indoors in Indonesia, and in Malaysia, the mask requirement had been lifted both outdoors and indoors, except in public transportation, hospitals, and medical institutions. Still, the WHO continues to remind countries that the pandemic is not over. They say they will publish a set of 6 short policy briefs this week that will outline the essential actions that all governments can take to reduce transmission and save lives.
We hope countries will use these briefs to reassess and readjust their policies to protect those most at risk, treat those who need it, and save lives. The pandemic is always evolving, and so must the response in every country.
Ano, ikaw, magmamask ka pa?
Because I have children that are unvaccinated, I will continue to wear my mask, especially when I'm in a setting where, again, social distancing is not being observed. You know, places na talagang, kumbaga, crowded. But outdoors, I'd love to enjoy now breathing fresh air without having to worry about, the mask.
No, I enjoyed it. As you know, I just came back from Denmark. Doon wala ng mask, but I have to say, parang nakakapanibago, and then immediately before and after you have that trepidation coming home, just before we got to board the plane, we had to wear the masks again. And then coming back to Manila, it was jarring again, wearing it, but it never, at this point, it never leaves you because like you said, we don't have kids anymore at home, but I still go to my parents. So immediately, nag-antigen test ako, you have to make sure. So it will still take some time to adjust. And now, I'm fully back to wearing face masks as a default. But I have to admit, once you're walking in the streets na walang mask, malaking bagay din.
Right. Now, taking it off from our interview earlier with Governor Defensor, his observation was, in spite of, let's say, in Iloilo, where masks are not mandated anymore, people still opted to wear masks.
Yeah.
I think what I see here is a lot of us Filipinos are having that kind of responsibility and accountability now that we've learned over the past 2 years of the pandemic.
Yeah, and the most important thing, as our officials stress, is that responsibility has extended not just to wearing face masks, but the fact that particularly in places like Metro Manila, for example, majority of us have taken the vaccines. That is still the most important consideration here. Diba? Parang it's not just the numbers, it's the fact that at least alam natin bakunado yung mga tao. That's where government is taking its confidence. That's where most people should take their confidence as well, if they know that they are fully vaccinated.
That's true. Now let's take a look back at our big question tonight. Our big question was, will you still wear face mask even though it's now optional outdoors? Here's what netizens have to say. Skylar Aquino tweeted that she will continue wearing her face mask outdoors for her health. She says another reason for this is because she also cannot stand the smell of vehicle emissions, urine, and cigarette smoke. Sushi Marie 11, meanwhile, said in a tweet that she will no longer wear face masks except when walking her dogs in their village. Now, Paulina commented that if mask wearing outdoors is for her own protection, then why not? But for J. Ram, the answer to whether to continue wearing face masks outdoors is a simple no. Now, you may also continue to join us in the conversation. Simply use the hashtag #TheBigStory and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at OneNewsPH. Now, like earlier, comments or tweets will be featured as part of our agenda to include you, the public, in the big story. Now, right after the break, we'll talk about the Luzon grid being placed under red alert, prompting fears of power outages. That when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Ukraine's forces have continued their rapid advance in the Kharkiv region, exploiting an extraordinary collapse of Russian defenses. Unconfirmed reports suggest Kyiv's troops have taken a key town not far from the Russia-Ukraine border. Russia's defense ministry, meanwhile, published a map showing much of the country's forces out of the Kharkiv region without commenting further. President Biden says the U.S. will not hesitate to use its military power against terrorist threats. He was speaking at a ceremony marking 21 years since the 9/11 attacks. He cited the July airstrike he ordered that killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, the successor to Osama bin Laden. Biden also said the U.S. owes an incredible debt to the troops who served in Afghanistan over 20 years. Sweden's right-wing opposition has narrowly overtaken Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson's camp in an early vote count. The bloc that includes the Sweden Democrats is likely to gain 175 mandates in the 349-seat parliament in Sunday's elections versus 174 for the alliance led by the ruling Social Democrats. The result cements the ascent of a party previously shunned as extremist by the political establishment. China plans to launch 3 unmanned missions to the moon over the next 10 years. The announcement comes a day after Beijing said it had discovered a new lunar material that contains helium-3, an isotype that may be a future energy source. Both China and the U.S. are eyeing the moon's resources, with space mining shaping up as a possible source of tension. Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bonnie Quinn. This is Bloomberg.
Nestle is taking the milk out of Kit Kats. The confectionery giant is rolling out a new vegan bar across 15 countries in Europe, and it's calling it Kit Kat V. It uses a rice formula to replace milk. The move is tapping into the growing trend for vegan chocolate. Currently, the market globally for vegan chocolate is valued at around $530 million, and that's expected to more than double to $1.4 billion in the next 10 years. But does the new Kit Kat V taste anything like the original? We thought we'd find out with a blind taste test. To me, that tastes slightly darker chocolate than the milk I'm used to. I think this is the vegan one. Going for this one on my left. Tastes good. Has the same kind of crunch. I think this is the classic Kit Kat. This is the one we all know.
You're right.
Yeah?
Correct.
Great. Okay, we might.
You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. The National Grid Corporation of the Philippines earlier placed the Luzon grid under red alert status after the forced outage of at least 7 power plants. The Luzon grid was first placed under yellow alert from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. This meant that the grid has thin reserves. It was then placed under red alert from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. That indicates that there is zero ancillary services or that a generation deficiency exists. The NGCP says there were 3,627 megawatts lost from the grid after 7 power plants were on forced outage while 3 were running on derated capacities.
Now, the Social Welfare Department has decided to close online registrations for its educational cash payout, citing budget constraints. JC Cosico with a report.
A social worker entertained this crowd of educational aid beneficiaries at the Valenzuela City Amphitheater on Saturday. Some of them even brought their kids, like Wendy, who was with her 6-month-old baby.
Wala pong mag-aalaga eh. No choice eh.
Just like the previous legs of the payout, there were still individuals who walked in without receiving a text confirmation from the DSWD.
Tapos, ang sagot pa nila sa amin, maghintay. Hanggang kailan maghihintay ang tao, di ba? O kawawa naman sila.
The same situation was observed at the payout center in Sampaloc, Manila.
Liliwanagin ko ulit, ang ating pong i-accommodate ay yung may mga text po. Humihingi po ako ng paumanhin dahil yun po ang aming priority po.
96-year-old Flory Rose had no choice but to go home empty-handed.
Sana po, priority ka matatanda. Ang kailangan po, piliin ang DSWD. Yung talagang mahirap dahil marami po dito nagpapanggap.
The agency has been stressing that walk-ins are not allowed to avoid a repeat of the chaos that took place during the first day of the payout, while those who haven't received text confirmation may have multiple entries or application errors. On the fourth leg of distribution, the DSWD said they can no longer accommodate beneficiaries. This comes as over 2 million have already registered online.
Nalulungkot man po namin pero yung sistema po natin ay hindi na po talaga kaya yung ating pong dami ng ating mga aplikante na napilitan na po tayo na talagang isara na po yung ating online registration.
But the agency noted they are coordinating with Congress to cover more beneficiaries.
Yung hindi mako-cover po ng DSWD sa aming pong pondo, ito po i-cover na ng ating mga mambabatas, ng ating mga district representative. So umaasa tayo na mas mabibigyan po ng pansin yung mga kababayan natin na hindi po talaga makapag-online register.
Those who have not yet claimed the educational assistance may do so every Saturday until September 24. As of September 10, over 340,000 students have been accommodated, amounting to around 862 million pesos. For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
Now for the big story in sports, it's history in the making for Filipina tennis star Alex Ayala after bagging the US Open Junior Girls Singles crown. Here's the report. It was a historic run for Filipina tennis sensation Alex Ayala as she became the first Filipino to win the US Open Junior Girls Singles crown. The 17-year-old Ayala captured the title with a 6-2, 6-4 victory over Czech Lucy Havlikova. The victory meant that Ayala now owns 3 junior Grand Slam titles, taking the girls' doubles championships in the 2020 Australian Open and the 2021 French Open. During her post-match speech, Ayala took the opportunity to thank her family while also dedicating the feat to the country.
Buong puso ko itong ipinaglaban. Hindi lang para sa sarili ko, kundi para makatulong din ako sa kinabukasan ng Philippine tennis. So hindi lang ito panalo ko, panalo natin pa.
In a statement, newly appointed PSC chief Noli Ayala commended her victory, saying that this is a testament to her Filipino spirit and strength of character. Likewise, President Bongbong Marcos hailed Ayala's historic US Open win, thanking the Filipina tennis star for bringing pride and joy to the country. So, what's next for Alex Ayala?
After making history, she said that she will return to the professional circuit for the remainder of the year. But Ayala said that she is not yet retiring from the girls division just yet. Ayala is currently ranked 297 in the Women's Tennis Association, the fourth youngest in the top 300.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
Now, the big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.